Martin, Eric Ain from Celtic Frost, thank you for being with us today. What was it about this span of time that made it right for the band to become active again? And how is it different from basically the last decade of relative silence from Celtic Frost?
Difficult to have a short answer for that question because, it's pertaining to about almost 15 years of time, so.
It's a 2-hour radio show.
Oh, okay, so we got all the time in the world. Good enough, so let me get started in that one.
Way back in '84.
No, I don't think we have to go that far back. I mean, the reason why Tom and me started talking about Celtic Frost, about our legacy, was that we were asked to involve ourselves in the reissue project of the back catalog, through Noise, who by that time had been sold to Sanctuary, the Sanctuary Group, and had a new management, and who were more than willing to work with us and get something good going. And that's why Tom approached me, said, listen, we got this offered. And so, of course, we were talking about our past. And that's when we also pondered the questions, what if, and, why did it all happen? Why did it come about? And would it be possible to do something again? Just at the time when the reissues happened, Tom was busy with Apollyon Son, so he didn't have the time to do that, and I just had a new business venture started, which means I had a new bar opened, which I was basically the manager of, so I didn't have time either to involve myself. But we said that I think we both realized that we would be interested to do this at one time or the other if the chance would arise, and it did when Tom basically was finished with Apollyon Son and realized, okay, this wasn't working for him. So he came and asked me if I'd be willing to try this out. We knew that it wouldn't come easy. We knew that we just couldn't get started and would have it like overnight. We knew that it would be kind of like a difficult thing to get the spirit of Celtic Frost back, or not back, but to re-invoke it, in a sense. Because we realized that this would be a new creature, this would be a new invocation, this would be the same name, but in a different time, and it would never be the same, and it shouldn't be the same. And that's why we also said we want to come out with a relevant artistic statement in form of a new record, instead of just going out playing the festivals and rehashing our past glories. Because throughout the 90s we got offered the ludicrous amounts of money to play some of those massive European festivals, and we always declined those offers because we thought we didn't want to turn out to be one of these golden oldies bands. That's why it took like 4 years of accomplishing this, of getting this band to work, of becoming a band again, and becoming Celtic Frost again, even more so, and writing the material to this album. It wasn't only about writing the material of this album, it was more of truly becoming a band again.
And I understand you self-produced the album, basically. You and Tom paid for most of it initially? Or?
Yeah, basically I arranged for the finances, and got the pre-financing going, and we decided from quite early in the game, and when we started out, we were negotiating with the record company, and we're demoing, and we realized, at that time we realized that this wouldn't work, and we didn't want to do the old mistakes, and we, of course, are in a different position now in our lives. So we said we will be self-sufficient. We will do this on our own. We will start our own production company. We'll finance the entire enterprise, retain all the rights, have record companies become licensing partners, but not owning the rights, also do our own publishing, and et cetera, And of course, it is much more comfortable. But you take more risk as well, but then again, with Celtic Frost, we knew that there was genuine interest in this band, in this business venture, if you want to look at that side, and so it wouldn't be that hard of getting it to work, because it took some substantial funding. I mean, like Peter Tedgren and 1.5 months of studio recording, and then basically doing some remixing and mastering and getting the cover artwork finished and promotional photography, etc., etc. That these things don't come that cheap.
Real quick, this is unrelated, but I heard you just refer to the band as Celtic Frost.
Yes.
Which is it? Is it Celtic Frost or
We
Celtic
say Celtic Frost. We say
Okay.
Celtic Frost, but as long as people remember it is Celtic Frost, whatever. As long as they remember the name, they may pronounce it in whatever way they want.
As far as I'm concerned, the argument is settled. It's Celtic Frost, everybody. Sorry, everyone in the States says Celtic. So
I know.
All right.
Because it took so long to get the album off the ground and to get it out, there's been talk about how much time was devoted to it. Do you think there's momentum still there to continue on making future material for Celtic Frost?
I think we wouldn't be out on the road promoting this album as hard as we do right now. This is a 48-day tour here in the North America. We're got a Japanese tour confirmed. We sadly just had to decline like a couple of Mexican dates, but we're talking about doing South America and Central America all together. There's a full European tour in the makings as we speak. We're talking of 30 to 40 dates in Europe. So we're going out there, and we don't do this because we just did our final record and this was it. This is not the swan song of Celtic Frost. The way we see it, this is a new beginning. The way we see it, this is a new version of Celtic Frost, and we have worked it in that way that there should be a future for this band. As I just said, business-wise, this took a lot of effort. This took a lot of money. This took a lot of time to get this going. Emotionally, personally, this took a lot of effort. This took a lot of time. This was sometimes really painful, and hard work, personal work. Just working out our differences between Tom and me and getting to the core of what our relationship was all about. This is one of the reasons why it took 4 years. In those 4 years, there were times where we were going down to the rehearsal room for like 3-4 times a week, and we weren't talking to each other, not one syllable, because we were in complete disagreement personally, but we knew musically, okay, we'd have to find our way. And I'll tell you, those were difficult times, and we didn't go through those just to say like, okay, that was it. So the way we see it, there's going to be a next record, and it won't take another 4 years because we got that worked out.
Sure.
It's just like when you get a new band started. It takes more time to get the band started, and once it's working, actually, it should take less time to continue working. And that's the way that we see it. And I think there's much more now that we have opened these floodgates again, of creativity, and have realized of what Celtic Frost is to us now in this new millennium. I think there's much more to come.
You were talking about just the nature of the struggle involved in making this record and some of the conflicts and disagreements. One question I have for anyone who's been in a band or doing music like as long as you have, Celtic Frost has been around for a long time now.
With some hiatus,
Sure, of course, but
some time off.
Yeah, but it started a long time ago, and here you are again. You're still doing it, and my question is, after devoting so much of your personal energy to an endeavor like this, being Celtic Frost, what happens when it finally ends, or does it ever truly end?
It did already end one time, for me, it ended back in 87. But that wasn't the proper end. There I was still struggling with dealing with the end. I was asking myself, was this truly the end? Or, it was a real difficult time for me. And then it truly ended in 1990 after Vanity Nemesis, or after the Vanity Nemesis tour, basically, for me. I tried to jump on the bandwagon again, tried to join in, and I realized this wasn't my world anymore. This wasn't my band, and me and Tom, I think we just were too separate from each other. And I couldn't deal with that. So, like everything on this, planet, of course it will end. Of course it will end. And I think I know pretty much that it will end. But this is also why I put so much effort in it. Because I know it will end. And if I don't take care of it, it will most probably end sooner than later. And if you listen to the music of Celtic Frost, and if you get some of the message of Celtic Frost, it's all about ending. It's all about realizing that basically whatever we do in life is futile. That life itself basically is about failure, is about death. That this whole struggle basically ends in death, and that we're trying to maintain some sense of self, some sense of self-realization, and making sense of what we are and why we are here, you know. And this is what human culture is all about. Why build churches or buildings, you know, that are supposed to last forever, you know? Yeah. Just the term forever tells you why. So basically you will last forever. So, you know, your society, your culture, which you're a part of, you know, will last forever and give you the sense of like that you're belonging to something that is larger than life and bigger than life. This is what creating music and creating art is about as well, you know? Mm-hmm. Not, of course, like not all the way, but this is one of the aspects, you know?
So would you consider Celtic Frost a monument?
That's a good question. To us, it is. You know, to us, of course, it is. To us, it is something that we have created that is separate from us and that is there to last for as long as it matters to people, you know, to persons outside of us. You know, so we can die, but the music may last. You know, so of course, it is sort of like a monument, you know, to ourselves. Just like if somebody builds a statue of George Washington, you know, I mean, most probably George Washington is not even a heap of dirt anymore, you know, everything that he ever was is gone in every sense, but, you know, those monuments last for as long as they're worth something to somebody, you know. So in that sense, it is like every piece of art that was created, sort of like a monument. But it's also, of course, a document of failure or of failure to come in a way as well, you know, which every monument is just the same, you know. I mean, like, you look at all those Stalinist monuments in the Soviet Union that are basically all gone or sold to private collectors or standing somewhere in a museum, you know. It's still a monument, but to something else than it was originally, you know, conceived for.
The new album focuses strongly on the themes of godhood and deification. Is this a theme or a metaphor that you see for yourself as for what you've created for Celtic Frost? Does this also relate to any idea or that you're a legend to a lot of Celtic Frost fans and that your work has become like a universal truth to so many fans and musicians?
Yeah, because Celtic Frost is so just universally cited in the scene. There's very few people who don't.
It has almost part of the fabric of the metal
community. Yeah,
at this point.
Yeah, which is something that, you know, happened without our doing it. You know, this is something that happened basically for most of the time when the band wasn't even in existence. You know? But of course, it's one of the reasons why the band is back. Because if there wouldn't be this genuine interest, you know, in this band, I think we would not be doing what we do right now. Maybe we'll be doing music, but most probably nobody would be interested. Nobody would care. So, you know. And most probably wouldn't do it on the scale that we do right now, because of course this takes a lot of time, and as I already said, this is also something that takes work, and you have to be able to pay for that, you know.
Sure.
Nothing comes cheap. This is one of the first lessons that I learned with Celtic Frost. You know, what I tried to get away from was exactly this Philistine business world, you know, that my parents were living in. This everything needs to be organized. You need to pay your taxes. You got to go to work. You got to earn your money. You got to pay your rent, you know, and all of that. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to become a musician in the first place. And one of the first lessons I learned is that the music business is the worst of all capitalist businesses there is. It's one of the worst, you know, capitalist businesses there is. And I had to learn, like, the hard way that you either learn to deal with this first or then you're gone. But anyhow, this is a different subject. That we are a legend is sometimes, like, more difficult. Because I am a normal human being, just like all of us. And right now, sitting here with you guys, I still sort of have to live up to that myth, to that legend that was not created on my behalf. Of course, we were working on that. We were building the monument, you know, as you just said, you know. Yeah. But it has become separate from our real personalities. Mm-hmm. It is something entirely separate. The satanic slaughter or Tom G. Warrior of the myth is not the Tom G. Warrior or the Tom G. Fisher, you know, that I know. Sure. Yeah. And the same goes for the Slate Necros and Martin Eric Ain, you know. And it's hard to cope with that in a way. And on the other hand, of course, it's also something flattering, very flattering, and is something I respect, and something I think that we all honor, And that we try to stay true with the record. But I think the record also deals with the issues of faith and belief, because we are in a different position in our lives altogether. All of us are older, have matured, have more experience, and have a different outlook on life or a different regard. We can look back now. When we got started, we could only look forward. There was looking back was where we wanted to escape from.
Yeah.
And now there's a different realization of time and of life altogether. And so there's a different realization of faith and belief and the need for it or the lack of it. And I think this is in a way what we're dealing with on this record. And of course realizing that gods are man's creation. Because man needs gods, because of course, as we just said before, man is born to fail, born to die, and it's hard to cope with that. And so gods come in, like this super ego to human society, and of course make it easier. And I don't have a problem or an issue with personal faith or belief, as long as people live it for themselves or within the group that they chose to live it with, But organized religion, I think, is true poison, especially monotheistic organized religion, claiming to be a believer of the one and only God, and everything else is not real or it must be the devil's work, I think that's completely preposterous. So that's why we chose to deal with that subject as well on this record.
And that leads me to a question that I think you probably answer better than anyone in the band. It's about the song "Dying God Coming into Human Flesh," because that seems like that had a very of all the songs on the album, that seemed like the one that had probably your stamp on it more than any other, at least in my opinion. And my question about that is that you're talking about the idea of man being born to fail and God being a super ego. The song "Dying God Coming into Human Flesh," is that any kind of metaphor for the band itself, the return of the band, being a God that was dying or almost dead in consciousness?
I haven't actually seen it that way, but actually it's a good metaphor. I will use it in the future. If you don't mind.
Great, no, sure.
I mean, no, it's a good metaphor. But as you just said, like a lot of the lyrics work on a metaphorical level, and sometimes on really several levels at the same time, And some of the lyrics, even in some parts of the lyrics, even are coming more from like a subconscious, like instinctive level of writing. Realizing that the combination of the words and the meaning strikes a chord, but not defining what that chord exactly is or what it was that stroked that chord. But you just realize it resonates, it holds something to it. And this is what the Dying God was all about. I mean, this was a song that basically was worked out for almost 3 years. We worked on it, then we let it rest, and then we took up, reworked it, and that happened on and off, for like 3 years. And it started out basically as a song where I was dealing with my own personal shortcomings, with my issues of depression, and the realization of failure of relationship, and not being able to connect to another human being that I really loved, and vice versa at the same time. The other human being that really loved me was not able to connect in a proper way to make it work for a sane or healthy relationship, if you want to call it. That's where it started out. But then, it reworked, and the metaphors started to change because I realized there were other sides to the same kind of metaphor. And of course, in the end, it's a complete oxymoron, in the way that, like, why should a dying God come into human flesh? Because human beings will die, So basically, in the end, it is like this is like this senseless kind of like, if it's a God, and he's dying, that already sounds like, why is a God dying? Because gods, basically, the one thing that the gods are is they're eternal. They cannot die unless, most probably by some laws, kill each other or whatever, like with the Greeks or the Romans. So I was trying to portray my sense of, we will perish. If the society I was born in, I I have grown up in, which is Christian society. If one day that will cease to exist, will that God still live on? Will it die? I don't know. So it's really working on several levels. And of course, God being this kind of like strong figure of this perpetually strong figure, something that cannot be questioned, something that has authority. But in that sense, it seems really weak and kind of like, what's the right word for it? Something that can be hurt, Vulnerable, right. Really vulnerable. And that was really important for me to work with this, this strong word of God, something that, people use to give themselves energy and force and strength, but use it in a completely different context.
Right. It's a very mournful piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has a sense of reluctance about it.
Yeah. It does, for me in Christianity, for example, I was brought up as stern Catholic, to me always this notion of that Christ died, but then of course he did rise again because he's a God, I would have thought that if Christ was a true God or an aspect of the one God, and he would have died and he would have not come back, that would have been even more of a sacrifice. Because that realization that, I will have to die. Oh my God, I will have to die, but I will rise again.
Yeah.
All right. This is what made those Christian martyrs. This is what made the first wave of I call them positive terrorists because they only basically hurt themselves. They were like sacrificing themselves. Going there and wanting to be killed. Kill me because I'm ready to die for my God to show you. That he is stronger than yours, basically. Which is in a way in the negative terrorist, what the Islamist terrorists do as well. They also kill themselves, but they take all the lives with them to show them, that they're stronger, that they can take all the lives and they're willing to give their lives. But it's the same kind of martyrism, basically. Give your own life, which they all do because they think there is an afterlife,
Yeah.
Which to me goes to show, how foul this idea is, how perverted it already was in the origin of Christianity, how they already turned it and twisted it, that idea. So I think if that God would have just died and said I'm willing to die for my ideas, and we should live our lives here and not with the idea of an afterlife, that would have been most probably, in my idea, a stronger statement.
What do you think of, say, the traditional idea of, say, Judaism that does not acknowledge Christ as God, but God as an ultimate and unending thing?
It does acknowledge God as an unending thing, but Christ is just, it's not even considered to be a proper prophet.
Right.
Well, Judaism is the roots for Christianity and Islam, but basically that's what Christianity and Islam are. They're just like Judaist sects gone haywire, in my opinion,
Prepare for your death threats now.
Yeah, and I think altogether, it's really hard to tell. It's really hard to say. Because I can't say this is better in this one than in the other.
Sure.
To me, in the end, they're all, the same in a way. That they're all basically the root of what I consider to be some of the most evil things going on this planet,
Well, yeah, we're in complete agreement.
Because this one God, if you look at what religions have been truly most violent in the last, in the last millennia, definitely been Islamic and Christian societies, and which goes to show that basically, in the end, it doesn't matter what God you have, be it Zeus, or be it some nature god from the Mongolian steppes, or be it Christ. In the end, these are all still violent societies, which have those gods. If it's a supposed peaceful God or not, if it's a God that has died and risen, And with Judaism, it's hard to tell. I have more of a liking to Judaism than to Christianity, in a way. Because to me, Christianity is much more perverted than Judaism for some reason,
I've never understood why anyone who believes in God and Jesus would be a Christian instead of a Jew. It seems like they would know better. if you're going by that model.
But you see, this is one of the problems. This is also why Synagoga Satanae came about. Synagoga Satanae, of course, being a term used in the Revelation of John, in the New Testament. And the New Testament was written somewhere after the death of Christ, 50 years, 60 years after the death of Christ, is when the first acknowledged writings surfaced. And the last that are included are somewhere from the 4th or 5th century after the death of Christ. And in that time, Christianity did arise and become a force to be reckoned with, and actually become the state religion of the Roman Empire. But when Christianity started, the first 250, 350 years, it had started as a Jewish sect that was shunned by the Jews because the Christians started to convert Gentiles, which is something that the Jewish religion was never, supporting, was never really working for. And of course, so the first enemy of the Christians were not the Romans, because they realized they could convert Gentiles, but it was the Jews. So in a lot of those writings, the Jews are considered to be one, if not the enemy of the Christians. And of course, because they were a Jewish sect, they realized that basically the mother religion, which basically was the authority on that one God, which supposedly spawned Christ, was denying, that creed, that sect. And this is why they use the term Synagoga Satanae. Because, of course, in that writing there is speak of the ecclesia, of God, the church of God. And now, if there was a Satan, which is also Christian creation, and he would have his own church. In those early days, they couldn't use the word church for Satan, because there could be only one church.
Right.
And you know why there could only be one church? Because, of course, there were different churches, there were different sects, there were different congregations of Christians, and some of those were even opposing each other, because everybody said, no, the way that we preach the gospel, because there wasn't one gospel, it was just in the writing, it was in the making, that is the true gospel. So there could be only one church, and that should not be denied. So Satan couldn't have a church, because that would make him equal to God. So what else, The Jews are enemies because they, don't want us to go on with the way we spread, in their view, the perverted form of Judaism, so Satan has a synagogue, the congregation of the enemies, which of course Satan is the word. Satan means
adversary.
That's right. And so it's the congregation of the adversaries, of all the adversaries of the church, and the Jews being one of them, of course. And when you look at who became the adversaries in those 400 or 500 years, all the people that started, who the heretics, the non-believers. If you look at that list, when I was reading through the definition, basically scholarly definition, of what that synagogue of Satanae was standing for, I realized very much that I was considered to be a part of that, because I was baptized a Catholic, I was raised a Catholic, and I decided to leave the flock. So I turned my back towards the church. So I have become part of the congregation of the adversaries in the view of the church. So in their view, I am part of the Synagoga Satanae. If I chose so or not, doesn't matter. And there's millions of people that have done that, and they're not Satanists, but to the church.
They might as well be.
To the church, with the writing defined through the New Testament, they are part of the synagogue of Satan, which of course the revelations pertaining to the future means when Christ will come back, in that view, they will all end up in hell. So basically they have already put me in hell if I will not be, if I will not be going back to them and, what's the right word for it, confess my sins and I'm sorry.
Penitent.
If I will not be penitent, I will be burning in hell. And so I said, okay, what the hell, let me write out that hell. Let me start defining my own hell, just like Dante did, basically, in my own way. So this is that kind of approach that I had. And this, of course, comes from the writings of the New Testament, of that Jewish sect gone haywire, and that going into this New Testament, especially the book of Revelations, and reading up on the history, starting to work out how was it conceived, I realized very much that why there is this hatred from the Christians toward the Jews, or where that came from.
This is just my idea of the album as a whole. You called it monotheist,
Yeah.
and it seems like it points to basically the absolutist sort of deconstruction of the nature of God, the nature of faith, the nature of creation in a lot of ways. I mean, did those things come to? I mean, because it seems like, like I said, it seems like a metaphor for the band and its history. It seems like a metaphor for a religious stance, and it comes together really fantastically. Did you see that coming when you started writing?
No.
Okay.
We had the general vision, but I think we realized in the process of where this was going, and it took some defining, it took some, definition with time and with the actual process of work, And of course, like the music and the lyrics had to be sort of like finished for us to realize, the full body of the work, It sort of was like if you're a sculptor and you're sitting in front of a block of stone, and you have this kind of vision of what you would like out of it, and you start working on it, and you start to flesh out. Of course, the vision will change in the process of work because the stone is, not doing everything you would like it to. There will be some parts where you realize, oh, here it is cracking, so I can continue like that. So you will have to work, and only in the end will you realize, okay, is it truly living up to that vision? And I think this is also why we chose the title monotheist, which doesn't pertain to a god. It pertains to a person that believes in one God. And we don't even define which person it is. And of course, we play around with the symbol of the cross as well, because you have the title written with an upright cross, and then you have it written with an inverted cross, And
I found that really interesting, because on the LP it's got the inverted on there, but I noticed that on the CD it's upright.
That's right. That's also if you realize with the CD artwork, the digipack and the regular CD and the album, it's all slightly different. You have
I bought all three versions.
Yeah, all three versions have slight differences and everything like that. And we of course wanted this because we wanted to have this as well, because that's one part of what we're trying to bring across in this album, that whatever you see, whatever you view, that seems to be eternal and seems to be set in stone and last forever, it ain't. And this is what we're trying to say with God as well. God is a man-made creation, and it will, all the gods will certainly go the way of man, which means at the end, the soul.
One of the tracks on the album is called Ain Elohim.
Ain Elohim, yep.
Yeah. Now, there was some debate I've read on this, because usually it's spelled E-I-N, and it's spelled, I've seen variations of it A-I-N, but that's also your last name.
That's right.
So, was there any play, was that intentional, or is that just the way it came out?
That was intentional, of course. It was purely intentional.
Oh, okay.
Realizing that, because my name, my artist name was inspired by the Kabbalah, by the sorry?
Ein Sof.
Yeah, the Ein Sof, that's right. By the, you know what the Kabbalah is?
Sure, of course.
Jewish way of deciphering the Bible through numerology, right?
Yeah.
And of course nowadays Kabbalah being regarded as something else, with Madonna Hollywood really being in the Kabbalah fever or whatever.
Yeah.
Of course that was different in the late 70s, early 80s, And Ein Elohim is from this passage of the Psalms, the 22nd Psalm, and it surfaces a second time as well in the Bible. And of course, in the passage, the entire passage reads, "He who says there is no God is a fool." And I was like, okay, there is no God, because I realize I am a fool. Just like every other human being on this planet, in my viewpoint, is a fool. Because what we do, and a lot of what we do, and a lot of what we think of ourselves is absolute foolish, So, I am the fool, and I am saying there is no God, And of course, taking up the history of the Essenes, another Jewish sect that did arise at around the time that Christ did arise, and held some beliefs that were also taken over by the Christians, but worked in a completely different way, because they themselves regarded themselves as absolute pristine Jews, and were trying to follow the Mosaic law to the absolute utmost extent, So they didn't convert. They didn't even convert all Jews. It took 5 years for a Jew, to go through the cleansing process of being at last enabled to join, the chosen ones to join the Essenes, you know. So they didn't even take up all the Jews, you know.
Right.
It was exactly the opposite from what the Christians did. They took about everybody because they, you know, realized power comes with mass, you know. And of course they were like slaughtered and disappeared after the Jewish revolt, you know, against the Romans in 66, after the death of Christ, and are only still with us because of the writings that were found in Qumran, you know, and that as early on as the writings were found, a lot of Christian creeds were trying to claim them for themselves as early Christian writings and so on. There was a lot of talk going on in the early times. Of course, realizing that these are writings of another Jewish sect, just like basically the Christians or the Zealots, you know, they were all rising at the same time, you know. Yeah. And I found that basically their belief in God, you know, their writings were like true, pure belief of that they would outlast everybody else, they would be the true survivors, just like a lot of Christian sects, Christian fundamentalist sects have the same thing, you know, like most probably the Mormons and some others, you know, have to believe that within Christianity they're the chosen ones. All the others are basically, you know, Christianity gone haywire.
Right.
Yeah. So to me that was the kind of like symbol that I needed for there is no God, because where is their God? If they would have been truly the chosen ones that they did believe, you know, the elite of the elite, you know, they would be ruling, you know, they're supposed to be ruling the planet, or the last survivors. And they just passed on into history.